Bienvenue, welcome to the Bassin de la Vilette in central Paris, where we're going to have a bit of a preview on the Paris 2024 Olympic Regatta. There's loads to look forward to, and it's quite exciting to finally be here in 2024. We've been looking forward to these Paris Games for quite a while. For those at home aren't aware, there's 329 events, 32 sports across 16 cities across the whole of France. We're focusing in on the rowing, and it's been really special building up to these Paris Games. Camilla, what do you think?
I think that it's been a short cycle, but the excitement has not shortened with that. You know, it's been like a build-up to a 4-year Olympiad, and I don't know, it's something about Paris that's just really special, isn't it? And it's one of those cities that I think people associate with the Olympics because it's been a host so many times, the third time that they're hosting a Games. And yeah, I think there's just something very nice about kind of bringing all these people into this little corner of Europe to compete. So yeah, very excited.
It's so special, isn't it? I should introduce ourselves. Camilla Hadland-Horrocks, junior world champion in the GB Women's 8. We've got Grace Prendergast, 5-time world champion and Olympic champion. And I'm Peter O'Hanlon. And it's a pleasure to be chatting
Are
about
you a world champion as well, Peter?
No, I'll just leave the end of my title off there.
Full stop.
Full stop, exactly. But Paris, we've obviously been trying to get out and see some of the games and what's going on around Paris, but we've also been to the venue, the Vers-sur-Marne. What do you think of the venue? As an Olympic rower, when you get to a venue like that, what goes through your mind when you look around it?
I think any venue is really, really special to get to, but particularly the Olympic venue, because you've known it for about 4 years, and this time 3 years, but you've been picturing what it's going to be like, what it's going to feel like, and I think for me it always felt so far away, and then that last bit speeds up so quickly, and then you're like, wow, I'm actually here now, and you get all your Olympic kit and it all starts feeling real, and then I think the nerves really settle in when you get there and you see this is where I'm going to be racing, this is everyone's boats, this is our competition out on the water. I think it just really hits home that you're like, we're actually at the Olympics now.
That's such a good point, because that's what the athletes are going through right now, isn't it? They're going through that phase of, I can't believe I'm actually here, and now all of this training, I've got to land into some performances on the water that start soon. How do you prepare for something like that? That's got to be quite a tricky thing to get right.
I think it's really hard. It's also really hard with the Olympics because it's a lot bigger than a world champ. So you do want to take moments and actually enjoy the hype and enjoy everything going on, because if you just sort of ignore it, I find it just sort of builds up and you feel like you're missing out. So it's finding that balance of actually embracing that you're at the Olympics, but also you're here to do a job, and that is the number one job. So you're trying to balance that and be like, I want to have fun, I want to see everything around, but also what is my priority here?
Yeah, it's got to be tricky to get that right. But I mean, they've been out training. We've been watching them training for the last couple of days, so they've at least got a feel for what it's like out there on the water now.
Yeah, I think these few days are a really funny bit of competition, and you kind of I guess nodded to it there, Grace, and that like everyone's very excited but trying to keep a lid on that excitement. But there's definitely something different about being here as being like a world championships, right? Because like we've all been at the Worlds where I think everyone is like in for business from day one. Everyone's, you know, very not segregated. I think we're a really friendly sport in rowing, and everyone's got friends around the boat park. But I think there's something about the Games with like the pin swapping and just like seeing everyone's different bits of kit. Because I mean, like some of the teams here have got like, you know, hundreds of different outfits. Like, I don't know about you, I've just been watching like tons and tons of like social media videos of like 120 odd different outfits for like Team USA or Team Canada or whatever. But yeah, I think there's just something about it, even in these first few days before competition starts, where they're out on the water training, getting used to it, but it still feels like the Games. Like, I don't know, it just feels really different.
It's cool though, isn't it? It's been so fun chatting to some of the athletes who are also desperate to get into the Olympic Village and see what it's like. Yeah. But a lot of them don't stay in it, do they?
No, I think that's where rowing, obviously it's hard to get a venue that's so close to the Olympic Village. So I think in here most teams are staying out towards the course, so you're a little bit segregated, so you're not seeing all the other athletes around, and this is probably the first time for a lot of athletes they're competing at a multi-sport event. So I think trying to get in and see that is really important as well, but also it's a really funny time the few days before because everyone's trying to fit in their training. So you're on this course, it's washy, it's bumpy, your boat's probably not feeling that great because it's such tricky conditions, but how do you stay confident that actually it's the water, it's not me, and you don't let those nerves sneak in, because I always found that was a really big thing for us.
I was about to say, that sounds like everything that you've just said. I'm like, that sounds like the Sea Forest waterway in Tokyo. Does that kind of sum up how you were?
It literally does, and I think you're often not rowing in the same with the same speed, because it's bumpy. You're having to stop all the time. Like, it's never ideal these few days of training, and you're often doing your last pieces in this kind of water. So actually having that in the back of your mind and knowing what's the conditions, what's us, and trying to stay confident in all of that is a big part of these last few days.
It's very cool looking at the lake, the Lac de Vesserman, because it's obviously got the rowing course on it, but it's got a big sort of bulge out that goes around the south. And depending on where the wind comes from, it's quite tricky to know what that's going to do to the condition. Quite in the sense of like bouncy, because the wind creates a little bit of wash around it and there's other boats moving around. But in Tokyo we had quite a lot of bounce because of the sheer concrete walls on either side, didn't we? Everything ricocheting off it. Whereas here, because of the sort of gravel bank, the waves sort of wash up, but then do they roll back in? It'd be interested to know what some of the athletes think about that, what it's like to race.
I've only heard about the wind so far. I've asked every person, like, what's the wind been like? What's the wind? Just to get a bit of a sense, because I feel like, you know, it's it sounds like it's pretty changeable, quite swirly, even when it's in one direction. The vibe I've got is that kind of it's pushing people about, but not very much.
Well, pleasingly, we look at the forecast for the next week. Touch wood. It's actually looking pretty good compared to when we were here last year for the juniors, because the juniors obviously the test event the year before the Olympic Games, and there was quite a wind last year.
Yeah, last year I was fearing for my life out at the 1,000 metre marker. No, I kid you not, I was like in a metal box. The lightning was striking. I thought I was going to get whisked away like Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz in the Twister. I was like watching all these poor junior, like under 19 scullers come through the 1K, thinking like, I really hope you're okay. Like, and someone looks after you when you get to the end, because that is really not the way to start your international career in rowing. Getting sort of swept away by what I can only describe was like the worst conditions I've maybe ever seen. Yeah. And it wasn't even that wavy, it was just very like really windy, lots of wind shadows, but also the lightning and the thunder, and it was just, anyway, let's not dwell on last year too much, because it's going to be fine.
We'll keep fingers crossed that it stays really good. But I mean, it's been a rosy like 25, mid 20 degrees here at the moment, and it's lovely. I mean, the course this morning, flat as glass, absolutely beautiful. But competition starts soon. First couple of days of racing, we're into the first round, quarterfinals and heats, etc. What's going through your minds when you look at the programme?
I mean, we went to the draw today, and I think like just waiting to see what those opening races will be is always just a little bit nerve-wracking. And I kind of forget, like, every round came up and I was like, ooh, they've got a tough race, like opening round. Yeah. Ooh, they've got a tough race opening round. I think there was like the men's 4 where I was like, ooh, GBN New Zealand in the first heat. Oh, that's... And then I kind of like centered myself again and was like, we're at the Olympics. Like, even just to be here, you've got to be one of the top 7 crews really in some of those bigger boats in the world. Yeah. And then in the small boats, you know, you've had to go through a pretty rigorous qualification even just to get on the start line. So like, I think it's maybe you remember at that point that the draw sort of filters out and you go, yes, that's why this is the hardest event in the world to win, and the one that everyone wants to win, right? So we've got first day men's and women's singles. I think that's always a good little taster as to what's to come for the rest of the week, because that's the biggest event. All
of the heats, 33 men's singles, 32 women's singles. It's a huge field. I mean, nations represented from all over the place. I think 65 nations racing through the course of the Olympic regatta. Yeah,
it's crazy, and I think a lot of athletes won't have raced each other before the Olympics, you'll be coming in and everyone will be on a little bit unknown, and I think a lot can happen in the last like 6 weeks of training into the Olympics. I think everyone will be sitting there a little bit antsy, being like, I should just want to get out there. But I think you make a great point. You forget that you've had to qualify to get here. The early rounds are a lot harder than they are at, say, a World Champs, because you don't have all those crews that are sort of filling up the bottom end. So right from the start, I think every race is like a do or die, because you don't know what's going to happen over the week, and you also want to always have the best lanes. I think that's such an important
that's true,
thing.
Particularly with a course that might have a bit of wind to it. Lanes going to be crucial progressing through. Okay, so that's the early rounds of competition. Looking at the sharp end of competition later next week, what are we thinking for the gold medals?
I think there's a few really dominant crews. I think if I had to place a bet on any crew to win, I would probably stick out for the GB women's lightweight double.
I'm glad you said that when we did it, because I think we would be, they'd be like,
yeah, you guys are a little bit
biased,
biased.
but
I'll take it. It's
solid for the team there.
I'd say it's potentially a safe bet. There hasn't been many races over this whole Olympiad. There's been a couple that have been close-ish, but I think as it's progressed, it's almost gotten more and more dominant, and I think the way they row, the way they approach rowing, and they seem like very mature athletes. They've had experience of having an Olympic regatta that didn't go their way, which I think actually helps a lot when you then come to your next Olympics. You learn a lot. So I think I would be very surprised if they don't cross the finish line first.
It's been so nice to sort of watch their return after their fourth place in Tokyo, right? I mean, the devastation of, they're fourth in the world, but missing out on the podium really does hit hard for anybody, doesn't it? And to see them return and having had such a strong last couple of years, they're basically unbeaten the last couple of years. And so going into this week, they're a pretty solid bet for gold. That's the lightweight women's double. Camilla, your view on the gold?
On the theme of unbeaten,
yeah.
I'm going to go with Florine in the women's single, because we had a conversation maybe a couple of months ago about Olympic experience, and you've just said it there about Imogen and Emily in the GB women's lightweight double, where having that Olympic experience under your belt, whether it was positive or a learning experience, is great money in the bank for coming into anything else, because you've done it. You've sort of got that first sort of tick in the box of that debut at Games. Florine doesn't have that, which I'm really intrigued about, in terms of in the single. It's a really lonely boat. She's obviously been in the women's four before, but coming to a Games in a single scull, I think I've obviously never done it, Grace. I know you've done the Olympics, but I think turning up in your sort of debut Games in the single scull must just be a whole nother level. Just you. I was going back through the stats of the women's single, and I could not believe that the Netherlands have never won a medal in the women's single. Wow. So not only is she going for the first ever kind of medal, I think it's going to be a gold. I hope, given that she's had this unblemished record. A lot of pressure on her shoulders. First time in the singlet at Olympics, first time going for a medal, first time going for a gold.
It's tricky, isn't it? Because everybody's trying to peak all for this week. So we do our best to read the tea leaves of the last few events and last couple of years, but it's so tough to get it right on the day, isn't it? And flipping from the women's singles to the men's singles, we look at Simon van Dort, Tuskos, Zeitler. Zeitler's, he does well, and then championships tend to be a sticking point. We were chatting about this the other day.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing with Ollie is he's produced some great World Championship performances. We saw that last year, and I think he's gotten that off his back, which has been great. The European Championships last year in Bled. I think that, or was it this year? Hang on, Szeged. This year in Szeged, of course. But where it's had that additional bit of sprinkle on it, where there's just been something that's been here's the hundreds and thousands that are going on the top, right? Whether it be a home Europeans in Munich, where it's this would be amazing because it's the home championships in Germany that haven't happened for so long, or this is my 100th race, this would be my 100th race win, or this would be the Olympic Games semi-final that gets me into that Olympic final. It's never gone the right way for him.
But we've enjoyed watching the surprises come through, haven't we? Simon van Dort, when he first pipped Zeitler, was that in Bled last year? Was that in Bled?
Hang on.
Was that? Where was it? We'll have to check the data on that. But Van Dort, and then Tuskos came out of nowhere.
Van Lierop.
It
was when Van Lierop was in the singles.
The Dutch singles tend to turn out pretty well when they turn.
Yeah, you're there going, it wasn't Simon, but it was the other Dutch guy. It was the other Dutch guy. That was Melvin Twailer back in Munich. In Bled it was Lenny Van Lierop. And so then this time around it's Simon, right?
Yeah.
It's those Dutch scullers that have just been there all the time.
Yeah, sort of lingering in the background, but then it was the same with Tuskos in Tokyo. I don't think anybody expected him to come out in the A final, let alone that last few hundred meters, phenomenal.
Yeah, I think it kind of shows what pressure does to people, and sometimes
Yeah.
when you come under the radar, you don't have that pressure. It's sometimes easier to exceed those expectations, and I do think historically some countries are better at peaking than others. Maybe it's just how they plan their full year cycle, but some just have that ability to find another gear when it comes to pinnacle events, whereas others kind of go the other way down.
This is a nice segue to Olympic moments in terms of peaking in a very special way. I wanted to ask you guys your like special Olympic moments, but you've leapt onto something that I wanted to share as like my favourite Olympic moment, looking back through the years, and it was at Tokyo, the women's 8 final, where Canada, looking at the Canadians and how they tackled that, we were obviously looking at, you know, all over the course, but I really enjoyed hearing how Kirsten Kidd, who's the coxswain in the Canadian boat, prepared for that, to draw out every little ounce of effort from the crew. She'd specifically found a few items about each athlete that she was going to mention to them in the race, and I thought that's a really special way of, when you've already tried to peak your best physically for the event, to draw out that extra little cherry on top, using some more baking analogy.
Those hundreds and thousands, the sprinkles.
For the mental peak as well, when you're right in that Olympic final. And I just thought, you know, that's a nice little story of how, you know, a coxswain had so much value in the boat to drawing out and getting the 8 to perform.
Yeah, well, I think that also comes back to the fact that like every athlete that turns up for this Olympic Games would have trained so hard. And I think when you get to that tiny little bit, it's like, well, how do you actually be better than everyone that has put so much into it? And it's often those little things that actually, did you do this tiny thing better than someone else, can separate you.
Grace definitely doesn't thank you, by the
Yeah,
way,
I
for
was
bringing
like-
up
I
the
was
Canadian women's 8. She's like, yeah, thank you for that.
That's
By the
all
way, I was there.
other boat.
I remember that.
It's like,
Not my
also-
favourite Olympic memory.
I also remember them doing well.
Yeah, I bet you do. You did well in the other boat class, though.
Yeah. We'll take it, yeah.
But how about you? So what is your best Olympic memory?
I think it's really hard. I think I obviously have ones as athletes and I have ones as a spectator. Like, before I started even thinking I could get to the Olympics, I remember sitting at home in New Zealand watching the Eva Swindell twins win their gold, both of them, but particularly the one where they were just pipped the German crew. And I think just watching that when I didn't even know that this was going to be in my future was so special. And I was like, wow, this is what like women from New Zealand can do, and it was such an amazing race, and it was really cool to sit and watch and see what that does to a country. And I think having that experience made it even more special than when I got there and I guess won gold as well. I think it can become a little bit normalised that, you know, you're working towards this and it becomes realistic, but then thinking back to how I looked at that when I was a young child was like, oh wow, maybe some people were looking at my gold like that, which is, it kind of makes
sure they were.
Yeah,
Really?
really.
Certainly
To
were.
get you in front of more schools at assembly.
But I think, I think watching it and then being a part of it, but I guess that is probably my one as a spectator. And then obviously I think my own one is just winning gold with Kerry. I think when so much goes into the journey, it makes it a different kind of feeling when you win. Like if you've just been working towards it for a year or in a crew for a year or two, I think it's an amazing feeling. But we had been rowing together since 2014 in a pair. So what's that, like 7 years by the time of Tokyo. So I think it just was a different sense of satisfaction and a different feeling that I was like, wow, this is all this work and we finally got to what we wanted to get to. So
Turn it
that's
into reality.
It's very unfair of them to push the Olympics out by a year, then to
I
make
know,
you wait
I
another year
know.
longer.
And then I've only got it for another week, my title, and I only got it for 3 years. So, it's all right.
Always an
You
Olympic
keep your Olympic
champion.
champion title for life.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, you keep that for life.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. How about you, Camilla?
So, kind of in a similar way, you know, I've never rowed at Olympic Games, but my kind of founding memories of the Olympics growing up, I'm from the UK, I was a big Team GB supporter of all the sports when I was growing up, but for me the one I really have in my memory is the Beijing Games in 2008, and I have this really, really vivid memory I just started rowing at the end of like 2006, start of 2007. So it was like my first Olympic Games as a rower. I've been rowing for like a year, or was maybe like 15 or so. And I have this real vivid memory of waiting to go to a regatta on the Saturday morning. So what will be the Saturday morning of this Olympics, you know, that middle Saturday, watching the men's 4GB, where they had that incredible like second half. They rode through, they got gold, commentated extremely well. You know, the sort of the British are coming there through. And I stood and I watched it in my living room with my kit bag on my back, ready to go to a regatta to race. So I was essentially like the car was running, like my mum is there, like, you know, doors open, we've got to go, otherwise you're going to miss your first race at, you know, in the J15 singles at, you know, Warwick Regatta. And I'm stood there in the living room, like watching the British men's 4 with like Pete Reed and Andy Triggs-Hodge and James Williams in it, and that for me sticks out as like I get quite like emotional even thinking about it, right? And I go back and I watch that clip so much. It's like a sort of real like inspiration. It really like kind of instills that like key like core, this is why I love this sport, and that really hooked me in when I was that age, and it's still to this day. What's this now, like 16 years later?
Oh, don't say that.
No,
Don't say
that. I still think about me standing in my living room watching that GB Men's 4 at Beijing and thinking like, wow, this is it.
And who from this, so looking to what we can look forward to in the next sort of few days, who would you like to see do well? So, you know, who do you see being that sort of inspiration to others, or who do you see has been on a journey of their own to get to this Olympics, and who would you like to see do well?
I think for me, someone that's had an incredible career but probably results haven't reflected it in the end is Jackie Kittle in the New Zealand lightweight double. She was obviously a world champion the year before Tokyo, and then the situation in New Zealand, we only had 2 lightweights, and unfortunately Zoe couldn't make it to the Olympics, so they had to give up their Olympic spot, and who knows what would have happened, but they were looking like they at least were going to be a contender for the gold medal. So to have your Olympics taken away in that regard, and then essentially we didn't really have a lot of other lightweights in New Zealand, so she's had to go around trying to find who's out there, because a lot of people thought the category was going to end at Tokyo, so a lot of people were still sort of trying to go for it. And it's been this project for her to like find someone else, and I think she's got a great partner in Shannon Cox, and I think Jackie used to be my training partner, and I just saw her attitude. It never really faltered. It was always like, well, what else can I do? Can I go and do some coastal rowing? Can I do like competing in anything else? I think just the way she's approached it, I think she deserves to kind of have her fairy tale ending, and especially obviously with this being the last lightweight event in
and it's
Paris.
such a shame that, isn't it? I mean, the lightweight category is always so hotly competed, and some of the tightest racing we'll ever see is in the lightweights, isn't it?
So it's going to be interesting. Obviously we've talked about the British women's double, and they're such fierce competitors, but I just think if they could get a medal, it would just be a really great way to end her lightweight rowing career after an incredible career, but just having that elusive, like, hasn't even had an Olympic experience yet. Yeah.
Amazing. How about you, Camilla? Who would you like to see do well?
I'm going to have 2 picks here, because I don't want to be like really heavy British bias. Because, you know, I've pulled out a lot of memories from the back, but it is just like those people that you've grown up with, right, that you think like, oh, I would love to see them do well, genuinely. Like, I've got a lot of like friends that I rode with when I was at school or at university who are now in various boats, like the women's 8, the women's quad for GB, I think is one that I really would love to see do well, because I think that's a boat that is steeped in so much history for GB, but kind of in the wrong. I say this like we've had so much like varying kind of reaction to a lot of silver medals, you know, like the Catherine Granger days, of those like heartbreak moments at Beijing, or the elation in Athens, where we've kind of gone through lots of podium finishes but no Olympic champions. And I think this boat is one that's come together with a lot of like fierce motivation, lots of talent, and a lot of stories like weaved throughout the boat. Lots of, you know, like a new young gun into the barrel seat, a couple of people who have like gone through a lot in their personal lives that have now come, you know, to the start line of a World Championships last year and come away with what seemed like an impossible gold medal at the time. So I think for me that's the crew that I would love to see do well personally. I think if I look kind of broadly and step myself outside of my little, you know, Greenland in GB, for me, I'd love to see the Norwegian women's double do really well. And I think that's been a great story. I think that they have a real opportunity here with like a lot of the other crews being quite fragmented or like up and down in performance, and they've been there or thereabouts, but you know, they've always been on the fringes on the podium like for all of 2024 despite being that kind of new, you know, new look double. And I'd just love to see them do well. So for me I think it's the Norwegian women's double.
Yeah.
How about you?
Good answer. For me, I've just so loved the last few years following Ollie Wynne-Griffith and Tom George in the men's pair. Like they've done so well recently, and I feel like they've been trying to build that pair, like you were saying earlier with you and Kerry. I feel like Tom and Ollie have been on a similar journey, just working away at that pair, gradually trying to just get it building up, and then getting it to perform on the day and peaking at the right time. And I feel like the last year's gone well for them. And I would just like to see that journey crescendo in a similar way to you and Kerry's journey, with, you know, they're arriving here in Paris, having worked at that for so long, and for that to turn into the result that I sort of know they've been working at for so long. Because like Tom was a massive inspiration for me during COVID. Like he broke the British record on the ergo in his parents' garage at home. And it's just like, it just shows this amazing sort of internal grit that both he and Ollie have. And like Tom would be out on his bike blazing around, you know, Oxfordshire area, and I just think to be going through that training on your own, I know athletes all over the world had to do it, and I think that for proximity it was, you know, following Tom and Ollie was a little bit more easy for me, but I just found it so inspirational for somebody to break a British record at home in your parents' garage and then come out of that, race the 8 in Tokyo, bronze medal in Tokyo, get in the pair with Ollie, and then build that pair journey through the last few years. They did well at World Cups, and then they started to turn it into championship wins, and then now. So yeah, for me that's a real, I'd just love to see that turn into the outcome that, you know, I think was at the end of your journey basically.
Yeah.
Would be so special. So yeah, that's the thing for me. Upsets. Have we got any upsets that we're thinking about? Competition. We haven't really started yet.
No one wants to jinx anyone's
Olympics
here, do we? We're all kind of like, oh,
commentator's curse. We need to reel that in and make sure nobody gets that. But I don't know. For me, I was thinking about this earlier. Like, what surprises or upsets have there been? And for me, it's not really at Paris that we're going to have had those yet. It's sort of qualification process where there's been a few upsets. And I was looking again at sort of the men's pair where I was thinking about Nicky van Sprang and Guillaume Kromenhoek, who just missed out 0.3 of a second on qualification, and there's just something for me about that Dutch pair making it through that would have been like a. But then you look at who did go through, and it's the German pair and the Lithuanian pair who just looked great on the day. It was such an amazing race as well, all the way through that final Olympic qualification regatta men's pair final. Absolutely nip and tuck through the last kilometre, and it just turned into a better sprint for the Stankunas brothers and for Kristen Saunke, I think. So it was just a really special race, but it was just sad to see Van Sprang and Kromenhoek just on the wrong side of the photo finish.
Yeah, and do you know what, Pete? That's reminded me actually, like the upsets I think that we will see that come this week are going to be those crews that had to go that long way around via the FOQR, and it happens every single Olympics, and people discount almost the people that have been, you know, have had to be rerouted via Lucerne to even get a place, and they go, oh well, you know, the fact that they didn't qualify at the World Champs clearly means that they're not going to be the ones to watch.
I've been quite impressed with the Danish women's pair. I think they were quite dominant in the last chance regatta, and did quite well there, and I do think there's potentially some minor medals up for grab in the women's pair, and they're both very experienced athletes. So I think having gone through last chance isn't going to have phased them in their training. Maybe it's actually given them more confidence. So I'm quite intrigued to see where they're going to fall into the field when you finally see the whole field race together for the first time.
Yeah, and that's it. It's kind of like overlaying them into the field that we've seen racing their races at the World Cup, because a lot of them don't do it, right? Like they don't bother with the World Cups because they're focusing on getting the space at the Olympics, let alone doing anything else. They're like, this is what we need to do. And the Italians, I think tons of Italians had to go via the FAQR. Men's 4, I think, is going to be a really interesting one as to where they shuffle in, because they almost were a surprise with that sub on board in Tokyo, right? Coming through for a medal.
We were talking about this earlier, like it was the sort of COVID regatta. There was a lot of illness going around and a few people subbing in. Again, I'm trying to avoid the commentators' curse. We haven't seen too much of that, touch wood. We haven't seen too much of that so far. But pretty fortunate in the lead up to this.
I think the other interesting one is going to be how a home advantage plays into it, and maybe for a crew like the French lightweight double, men's lightweight double, and women's lightweight double, and they've obviously both come through the final Olympic and qualification regatta as well, but then now they're in their home course. Like, how are they going to respond where it's literally their crowd?
A large French crowd.
So I'm quite intrigued to see how the French crews sort of embrace that as well.
Well, if it's anything like the rugby sevens that Pete and I went to last night, where Allez Le Bleu was like,
it was electric.
The decibels.
Stade de France
mad.
packed, ceiling to floor.
So,
phenomenal.
Yeah, it'll be good.
But it's tricky when you're trying to peak for a regatta like this, particularly when you're trying to peak in 2 boat classes. We've been chatting about doubling up, and there's quite a lot of doubling up going on out there. And we were particularly talking about it with the Romanians, who we could see some, Radis and Bodnar particularly, depending on where they finally decide the doubling up's going to turn out, they could see themselves climbing the rankings of top female medalists, Olympic medalists in the world. It's going to be pretty tricky to balance 2 boat classes though through the course of the week.
Yeah, it is tricky, and I think especially how you progress through the week is so different, so that's when you need really good plans. Like for us, we knew exactly what was going to happen throughout the week, because you might be in a situation where we were in the pair having multiple races and we qualified from the heat for the 8, so then all of a sudden they go into a training week, and how do you do your primers and the 8? So having all of that is a lot to deal with and a lot to balance. And I guess also if you have a tough race in one crew, then how do you switch that mentally to be like, well, actually now I need to park there, I need to go and race my heat of the 8, when I'm still a little bit stressed about that. But I think weather permitting, it's actually, I think all the hard work in that regard's done. I think the hardest thing about doubling up is in the lead up of how do you prioritise both boats? How do you make sure both boats feel like they are number one, as opposed to a second boat and a first boat? And that can be the hardest thing when one's not going that well. Do you have to put more effort into that? But I think this is where we need Paris to have no wind and sort of play into their favour, because I know that affected us in Tokyo.
Grace, we're so lucky to have you. I mean, there's not that many people in this sport. It's really rare, right, to have. And I know Romania as a nation have done it over many years, especially on the women's sweep side. We saw them in the sort of late 90s and early 2000s doing a lot of that, but it's been less common, I think, as the sport's progressed and as performance tweaks and centimeters and whatever's going on in that setup to make it the perfect race boils down. That's advanced so much over the last 20-25 years that doubling up's just become less and less common. So to be doing it in recent history, we're very lucky to have you, because I like to be able to be like, what's it like?
But it's so true, isn't it? It's like rowing really is a sport of all your eggs are in one basket. Usually you throw everything. It's not like swimming where you can enter so many different events or so many different categories and walk away with several medals from a single Olympic Games. But I suppose that sort of brings a lot more hangs in the balance when you're just going for one thing. But to be able to juggle 2 boat classes.
Yeah, I do think though that I would put the Romanian women's double in a similar category to Kerry and I's. They've rowed together for so long. I mean, by the time you've spent that much time in a boat together, actually sometimes having another boat to mix and sort of give you a little bit of a break and freshen up is sometimes a positive thing as well. I think I just can't wait till someone on the men's side does it. I think they need the first crew there to sort of take the plunge and double up. And,
it's a good thought. I've been wondering if we'll see the the Croatians back into a crew boat at some point, or whether they're back in the pair. They love to row together, but there's some decent depth coming up in the Croatian squad, and they could think about a crew boat and not lose their pair or double.
Or even the Italians, right, in the sculling side. Like, we've seen them switch up between the double and the quad and whatever, and if it works, I don't know. It's the programming, right? That's the main thing you've got to look out for, because it's not easy to find two disciplines that work together, but if it works, it's really cool.
Yeah, saw that in Tokyo with the Australian women also did it, but the pair in the 4 is so much harder than the pair in the 8, so you've got to be very cautious,
So much to look forward to.
I know.
Well, folks, I think that's our preview for Paris. I hope you've enjoyed listening in on our chat on a whole variety of different topics. We've covered just about everything, from the course, the Olympic Games, our picks. Let us know your picks. Pop them in the comments below, your favourite gold medals or your Olympic moments. I think we'd love to hear what they are. Maybe we'll raise them in a second edition of the preview. But I think we'll sign off from now. So, Camilla, Grace, lovely chatting with you. My name's Pete. Look forward to following the games with you all.